Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Heldt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, my guest is Ryan Reiffert, who is from the law office of Reiffert PLLC. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate you having me on.
So, Ryan, tell us some about you and why is it that you got into studying law?
Yeah, sure. Well, so the first kind of inkling that I had that I might want to be a lawyer was way back in high school, when I thought, well, maybe two or three things that I wanted to do. And I'll tell you a brief funny story. My parents worked down the hall from this elderly attorney at the time, and I went and shouted at him for a couple of days and said, sir, I think I want to be a lawyer. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do? And he looked at me and said, well, why do you think you want to be a lawyer? And I'm this bright-eyed little high school kid. I'm like, well, sir, I really like to argue with people. And he looks at me, he goes, son, just get married. But anyway, I enjoy it. It's a profession. You get to kind of exercise your brain, stretch your brain. You get to help people. There's a lot of variety day to day. I enjoy it. It's a good profession.
So, you're out on your own now. What did you do before you kind of decided to go out on your own, and why did you decide to step out on your own and hang your shingle?
Sure. So I started my career in big law, did several years in very, very large law firms, both, well over 1,000 lawyers, multiple law offices all around the globe doing big, I think the biggest deal that I ever worked on those was 7 billion, massive transactions. And then realized that I wanted to do things other than work in my life and kind of wanted to work in a little bit of other balance. So then I went and became a startup general counsel, did that for about 3 years. And that was, I kind of got more variety in my plate, but was still, working every bit as hard, had all the crazy nights. And then so decided to hang a shingle and still have the crazy hours. So I haven't found the work-life balance yet. But I now have more control over my time, let's say. Right. And, if I want to kind of get out of the office at 6 and go to the gym for 2 hours and then boot back up once I'm at home, that's a lot. I have a lot more flexibility to do that than I did previously. And as well, the area that I'm in, which is San Antonio, Texas, I feel like, so I'm from San Antonio originally, and then I moved away and moved back, et cetera, et cetera. I sort of feel like there's some room in the market for some high quality solos to provide services where, maybe a lot of other markets look a little bit different, but I think there's room in the market here, and it's been good so far.
Yeah, so it's great that you have that big business experience to be able to bring to small business, which again, all of us are small, and we need that somebody with that knowledge to be able to bring to us. So I think that's really important.
Every mighty oak tree was an acorn once upon a time.
Right. So tell us, what are some of the common mistakes that you are seeing people, make when they're starting up their business?
Yeah, sure. So one of the biggest ones is not setting up an entity properly, right? So everybody's heard about Formula LLC, and that's good that education is getting out there, and I'm in favor of it. It's only half the story though, right? Because if you go talk to a lawyer, and I have people who come and talk to me, I'm like, look, you form your LLC with the state, but there's 2, 3, 4 other documents that you need to get to really kind of build that wall, right? And if you think about where the rubber meets the road with LLC, corporation, partnership, whatever, is if you get some sort of lawsuit, some sort of liability, and that appears, what you want to do is be able to say, look, this liability stops at the business and doesn't spill over to my personal financial holdings. It doesn't spill over my bank account, it doesn't spill over my car, house, whatever. if you don't have all of the documents done correctly, you can do what's called piercing the corporate veil. And people probably have heard that phrase before. You may or may not know what it means. But what that means is you get to look behind the entity and you say, hey, you had this LLC on paper that was formed, but you didn't really do what you were supposed to do. So because you didn't follow the rules of the LLC, we, the people who are suing you, also do not have to follow the rules of the LLC. So we're going to get at you personally. So I see people show up with, either they've done a certificate of formation, they don't have their operating agreements, minutes, bylaws, resolutions, all that other stuff. They have one of the 3-4 pieces that they need. Well, okay, that's, it's a good start, but it's not enough. It's not sufficient. Or on the other hand, what I will see very commonly is people who use, for example, an online provider. And I know a lot of lawyers like to hate on their documents. I think a lot of the online providers, the documents are good. They're quality documents. The problem is when you get that like multiple choice quiz with one of these things, if you answer some of those questions wrong, you're going to have a set of documents that is inappropriate to your situation and might actually end up hurting you. And I've had to go back and fix, multiple sets of these incorporation, LLC formation documents that, hey, it would have been a lot cheaper if you just hired a lawyer the first time. Now, if you know enough and you're confident that you can answer all of those multiple choice questions correctly, great. I mean, I think there's absolutely a space in the market for some of the online providers. But if you don't answer the questions right, you're going to get, you need a size 10 shoe and you get a size 4, right? Like it just doesn't fit. It's not the right thing.
So, in there, you're talking about the kind of formation and stuff like that. And you did mention operating agreement, where I've run into a lot of people is multiple owners and they don't have this operating agreement. Can you talk a little bit about, the complexities that brings?
Sure. If you don't have an operating agreement, or if you don't have a good operating agreement, so operating agreements are LLC. For a corporation, we call it bylaws. For a partnership, we call it a partnership agreement. Fundamentally, it's the same document with different features. It's a rule book. So if you and your partners get in a disagreement, decide to go your separate ways, one of you starts slacking off, one of you wants to sell out and the others don't, et cetera, this operating agreement is kind of your rule book. It's like a business prenup for how you're going to handle these situations. If you don't have one, or if you don't have a good one, you're probably going to be writing a check that has 5 figures in it to some litigators to go fight that out in court, right? Whereas on the front end, it would be a fraction of that cost to do it correctly the first time.
Right. I think that's something that's important for the listeners for me to emphasize is that it's much cheaper to do this right from the beginning than to go back and either pay somebody to correct it, or unfortunately find out the hard way that they didn't do something that they should have.
Right. I mean, showing up I think a lot of people who are just starting out in business don't realize just how expensive a lawsuit can get, right? If you and your partners decide to take it all the way to a jury trial, you could easily spend $100,000 easily. Wow. Easily. Lawyer time is not cheap, and, doing it correctly the first time can save you a lot of money.
Right. Now, you also practice estate law.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about, if someone is in business with partners, pick your entity, and they don't have a good operating agreement and one of the partners passes away, how does that, go into the estate or trust, or does it go in, or how does that work?
Right. So if you don't have a good operating agreement, then the shares that the deceased partner had in the company or in the partnership in the LLC, those shares would pass to their heirs, just like if they had a pile of gold coins or an antique sewing machine or anything else that's in their estate. Those shares in the company are going to pass to whoever would take over, whether it be under a will or heirs at law or what have you. And you may have some affection for, say, your business partner's kids, or you may have some affection for your business partner's wife, brother, sister, whoever their heirs would be. That doesn't mean that you necessarily want to be in business with that person, right? And I would also add to that, another thing that you see, and if you've talked to a life insurance guy, the life insurance folks love to pitch buy sells. It's also the same thing if you get divorced at least in a community property state, right? That any property acquired during the marriage is community property. So guess what? If your business partner gets a divorce, you are now in business with the disgruntled ex-spouse, and get ready to have some fun. So having something like a buy sell is good. You can also roll something like that into an operating agreement, right of first refusal or some kind of push pull, something like that, that allows the remaining partners to both keep management of the business in a way that they want to continue to manage it and continue to make money for everybody, but also to protect all the partners, right? Because a lot of these agreements, when we're making the agreement 5, 10, 20 years before, I don't know whether I'm going to die or you're going to die, right? So the agreement that protects the business, and also you want it to protect your heirs as well, because it very easily could be that I'm the one who passes and you keep the business. Well, I don't want my kids to go get kicked out on the street and have to live in a cardboard box and whatever. I mean, I want them to be taken care of as well. So it's important for everybody to agree on, look, here's how we're going to continue the management of the business, and here's how we're going to ensure a fair price, and et cetera.
Right. We kind of touched on a little bit about, setting things up and some of the mistakes people make when they first kind of start. What are some of the questions that you wish that people would ask you when they, sit down with you for a consultation?
I get a lot of people who kind of they get given advice by I don't know who, but they get not necessarily great advice. So I very commonly get, hey, I want to do a DBA, or in Texas we call it an assumed name, and I a lot of time have to kind of back them up and say, look, well, what are you trying to get out of a DBA? What's your goal? And I think I get the question enough, and I haven't actually gone and done this, but there must be some bad business book out there that tells people that DBAs are equivalent to LLCs. And they're absolutely not. They don't provide any liability protection. It's a nickname. It does not insulate assets. It does not provide any protection. But I get the question all the time. You're like, hey, I need help forming a DBA. We don't form a DBA. It's just something that you go file. And I wish people would ask me, hey, start with the goal, right? Hey, what's the best way to protect myself? Instead of, I think I can do this legal research on my own, and I'm pretty sure that what I need is a DBA. So let me go ask this attorney how to form a DBA. Well, don't start there. Start with, what are you trying to accomplish? I mean, we go to school for a long time and we train under other attorneys for a long time to learn how to advise clients, and like, okay, if your goal is X, then you need to do ABC to get there. If your goal is Y, then you need to do this other thing to get there. Those are, the path to get to that goal is something that we spend a lot of time and money and pain to learn. Right. So you doing 5 minutes of research on Google, can sometimes be counterproductive.
Yeah, I think lots of times, because I know when people come into me, and again, the same thing, it's like, oh, I want to set up an LLC. It's like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to start up a business. It's like, okay, well, what kind of business? Because that just an LLC may not be the right thing for you. We may need to look at a different entity structure depending on what you're trying to do. And it's so hard sometimes to get people just to have that conversation with you. And most of us, and I'm sure you do the same thing, most of us, give people a free consultation, initial consultation. Yes, we're hoping that you're going to do business with us, but tell us the story and then let us help you put it together. Because like you said, we got years of experience of doing this. I think one of the other mistakes that I see a lot of people, making with this is that they don't let you and I talk. I mean, to me, the conversation should really be with the attorney, with the CPA that they have advising them to talk about, hey, from a tax standpoint, this is what I see. And then you as the attorney, it's like, well, okay, I see where you're coming from, but there's other ways to skin the cat from a legal standpoint. And, you have your specialty in your state, and you may be licensed in other states, but each state is different, correct?
Also, yeah, also true.
So
you have different rules from state to state.
Yeah. So I always try to tell people, it's like, get your financial team together and don't be afraid to let them talk, because most of the time, the CPA and attorney get together. We're not just going to sit on the phone and gab for an hour and then, bill you for a couple hours and talk. We're going to get down to business, get it done, and kind of move on. So I think it's really important for people to understand that, let your financial team and your trusted advisors talk, because it's important.
Totally agree. And don't get fixated on one particular solution, right? Be open to alternative. I mean, to take your example, somebody who wants to form an LLC. Well, if you have 3, 4, 5 business partners, an LLC may not be the right answer. You may want to do a corporation.
Right.
And I'm really glad that, the word of, hey, form an LLC, form an LLC, form an LLC is getting out there. That's, that's in the plus side. That's a good thing. But with multiple parties, I mean, LLCs are flexible, and a lot of flexibility, if you have multiple people, can be a bad thing.
Right. Agreed. What are some of the challenges that you are facing now? It could be, COVID, it could be, whatever, but what is it that you see that's challenging you right now?
Yeah. So I actually, it was great timing with COVID. I launched my solo practice in the beginning of February 2020, right before everything locked down. And so it was just the best timing imaginable. It was a great year. So COVID was certainly a challenge. But as of kind of early 2021, everything started to kind of open back up, and I feel like there's been a lot of pent up demand that has come forward. Now I would say the challenge is kind of figuring out what's going to be the new normal, and what are we going to, I mean, because everything was opening up, and then Delta happened, and well, are we stopping? Are we starting? And then, okay, well, we're comfortable with Delta. And then now Omicron is coming, and well, are we stopping? Are we starting? What? And I think there's some silver linings that are coming out of it, right? Like there's a lot of, doing meetings like this over Zoom has become a lot more commonplace. And I feel like that's a huge value add. Nonetheless, I still see a lot of people who want to meet in person, and that's fine. I'm open to it. It's not an issue. I would say the challenge for me is kind of figuring out, what are things going to look like 6 months from now? Right. And being able to plan for that long term, the best laid plans of mice and men.
Right. I mean, are you finding, there in San Antonio, are you finding more people starting up small business because of being laid off or whatever's happened, that more and more people are opening up the small business?
Yeah, I would say that there was a pretty solid wave of that towards the beginning of 2021, kind of end of 2020, sort of people who had been laid off, and I guess took a couple of months to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? And then, okay, well, I've had this idea sort of on the back burner, and, I really want to go for it. It's sort of normalized since then. I'd say we're sort of back to, it never really stopped, even in the middle of the pandemic. People were still, and I take something very, complimentary about the American spirit from that, even in the middle of lockdown and everything's remote and everybody's working from home, and, who knows what on earth is going to happen with the economy, that people were still going out and starting businesses and pursuing their dream. And there's something special about that. And so not to get too Pollyanna, but I do take a lot of inspiration from that. Like I said, big wave of it. And I feel like we're kind of back to the normal, quote unquote, normal pace, at least with business formations. I still see a lot of money sitting on the sidelines as far as investors. A lot of dry powder that's kind of started to unlock. We've seen a couple of professionals, doctors, vets, dentists, that kind of thing, selling practices the last few months. That's been very common, which I attribute that to people who were on the cusp of retiring anyway and sort of had that decision made for them and said, you know what, COVID, just forget it. I'll take the check and sell out. Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I am cautiously hopeful about the state of the economy and the state of American entrepreneurship.
Right. What, if you could go back in time, what would you tell young Ryan, when he's first getting into law? What would you tell him?
It's a good question. I haven't thought about that in a little while. All
right.
I would say the biggest, no, I got you.
I wanted to argue in high school.
I would say the biggest lesson now is you never know where business is going to come from, and cultivate every single relationship that you can, even if it's not the kind of thing that you're thinking, oh, well, maybe this person can send me business. Just keep relationships alive to the maximum extent possible, because I have gotten some business and I have gotten some deals and I have gotten some clients from sources that I just made both of my eyebrows go way up, and I was like, that came from there? Like, are you kidding me? I'm super grateful and very, very glad that I feel fortunate, but just not what I had expected at all.
Right.
So I would say that's the lesson, is that you can't predict that, and that even still, I don't know where business is going to come from. It just comes out of left field sometimes.
Right. What was the one piece of advice that somebody's given you in your professional career that has really stuck with you over time?
I'd say my grandfather, who told me just knock on more doors.
Mm-hmm.
Right? As just keep going. If something's difficult, put one foot in front of the other, keep going. Another way that was said was, I was working under a senior partner in New York, and we had a massive deal. And I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard this. And he said, well, how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time, right? You just one foot in front of the other, just keep going. If you take time to step back and be overwhelmed by the whole thing, then you're going to be overwhelmed, and that's not going to get you anywhere. Just keep pushing.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, especially, and that's in any industry, any job, or life in general. You could definitely, let everything overwhelm you. But, like you're saying, keep moving forward, and you'll get through it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So Ryan, we've talked about quite a bit of stuff so far. What have I not asked you that you wish I had?
I would say, what's the biggest thing that most small businesses miss? The biggest kind of gap in their armor, so to speak. And my answer to that would be, use written contracts to do business. I cannot tell you the number of phone calls that I get where somebody had some kind of he said, she said deal, and I end up having to refer them out to go fight in court, and they end up writing a $10,000, $20,000 retainer. If you have a written contract that is reasonably well drafted, and you spend a few hours with an attorney on, and you can use that thing 500 times, you can use it over and over and over, just develop a good boilerplate contract. can save you so much money. It's just and a lot of people think that, oh, handshake deals are fine, or, oh, I use this form from some place that I found on Google and it'll be good enough. And, sometimes it is, but you're really rolling the dice.
Right. I think that's good advice, because those contracts that they pull offline or whatever, or the handshake deal, they're great when they work, but if they ever get challenged, then they're probably not going to work. And you pay more, on the backside than you would if you got it done right in the front.
Right. And the downside can be significant. I mean, you could be looking at the other thing. If you go to court, there's no guarantee that you're going to win.
Right.
So you could end up writing a really big check to your attorney, and you still have to pay the other side. I mean, it can be literally business destroying.
Right. So Ryan, if our listeners like what they hear and they would like to talk to you, how can they reach out to you?
So you can go to my website, which is www.ryanreiffert.com. Or you can go on virtually all of my social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of that. It's all Law Reiffert, and it's LAWREIFFERT. And I also have a YouTube channel. So any of the above, you feel free to ask me any questions, or just tell me that you think I'm great or what have you. But with the caveat that any information you provide me on there is not attorney-client confidential until we execute an engagement letter. So don't send me an email that says, hey, here's all of my confidential secret legal problems. Please tell me. Just reach out first and make sure I have a chance to run conflicts.
Right. Sounds great. Well, we really appreciate your time today and everything that you've talked to us about.
Thank you for having me, Gary. Really appreciate it.
Great. So today our guest was Ryan Reiffert with the law office of Ryan Reiffert PLLC. See you next week.
This show has been produced by Market Domination LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.